The cold, distant gaze of the moon filled our viewport, a familiar sight that should have brought comfort, yet today it only whispered of an ancient, cosmic dread. I ran a final diagnostic on the life support systems, the low hum of the lunar module a steady counterpoint to the nervous thump of my own heart. This wasn't my first deep space assignment, but a prickle of unease had been clinging to me since we left Earth orbit. Perhaps it was just the unusual nature of this mission. "Descent phase initiated, Captain," Alara announced from the pilot's seat, her fingers dancing with practiced grace across the console. Her sharp, intelligent eyes, usually alight with curiosity, were narrowed in concentration. Captain Kale, stoic as ever at the command station, nodded. "On schedule, Alara. Jax, confirm all systems green for orbital transfer to Orion Prime." "Green, Captain," I replied, my voice steadier than my pulse. 6 months at Orion Prime, cataloging cosmic radiation, then a glorious return home. Standard procedure, nothing we hadn't drilled 1,000 times. A sudden, sharp crackle burst from the comm system, startling me. "Lunar Vessel Horizon 7, this is Mission Command, priority transmission." Kale frowned, reaching for the switch. "Captain Kale, go ahead, command. Horizon 7, divert to Outpost Kronos immediately. Containment breach detected at Orion Prime. Repeat, divert to Outpost Kronos. Atmospheric integrity compromised." Alara's head snapped up. I exchanged a stunned look with Kale. Outpost Kronos, that auxiliary base had been decommissioned decades ago, a relic from the early colonization attempts. "Command, please confirm diversion to Kronos." "Our mission parameters specify Orion Prime," Kale responded, his voice betraying a hint of the shock we all felt. "Confirmed, Captain. Orion Prime is currently unsafe. Proceed to Kronos for mission continuation. Coordinates transmitting now." The line went dead, leaving only the soft drone of our own systems. Alara turned to us, her face pale. "Kronos, that place is just a skeletal shell, isn't it? No operational power grid, minimal life support." "It was designed for short-term geological surveys, maximum 4 personnel," I added, pulling up the base schematics on my comm tablet. "They abandoned it after the chrono engine incident." "What now?" Kale asked, his eyes suddenly sharp. "Just a geological anomaly, Captain. Bad ground, unstable readings, nothing serious." "That's what the briefing said anyway." I tried to sound confident, but a chill was already forming in my gut. Kale's jaw tightened. "We have our orders, Alara. Calculate new approach vectors for Kronos. Jax, pull up any archived data on the outpost, anything at all." "Yes, sir," she murmured, already rerouting our trajectory. The rest of our approach was silent, filled with a tension that hummed in the air. We worked in grim efficiency, each of us glancing periodically at the dark, silent comm panel, perhaps hoping for a retraction, a sudden return to our original plan. No such message came 2 hours later. Alara guided the Horizon 7 down to the lunar surface, a textbook landing. As the dust settled around us, a strange detail caught my eye. "Captain," I said, my voice quiet through the comms, "the outpost, it has lights on." Kale leaned forward, squinting through the viewport at the distant cluster of habitats. "Impossible, power was supposed to be shut down years ago." There was no denying it. Several windows glowed with a faint, amber light against the harsh lunar landscape. "Running diagnostics," I said, checking my instruments. "Power signatures indicate full operational capacity. Environmental systems are running." "Could Mission Command have reactivated it remotely?" Alara suggested, though she sounded unconvinced. Kale shook his head. "Not without telling us." "No, something isn't right here." We suited up, the familiar process a cold comfort in the face of the unknown. The 20-minute walk to the outpost was eerily quiet. Each low-gravity stride sent small puffs of dust rising and falling in elegant parabolas. As we approached Outpost Kronos, the lit windows became clearer. I could make out the faint outlines of equipment within and shadows moving behind the thick, reinforced glass. "Still doesn't make sense," Kale muttered in my earpiece. "This place should be dormant," he checked his handheld scanner, "and yet full operation." The main airlock was on the eastern side. I half expected it to be sealed or broken. Instead, the external panel lit up, bathing the airlock in a soft blue glow. "It's recognizing our presence," I noted. Surprised, Kale hesitated for a moment, then pressed his gloved hand against the access panel. The outer door hissed open smoothly. We stepped inside the small chamber, and the door sealed behind us. The airlock cycled perfectly, as if someone had been maintaining it meticulously. When the inner door opened, we were met by a rush of clean, recycled air. Atmosphere reads normal, I confirmed, checking my suit display. Oxygen levels stable, no toxins detected, Kale nodded. Helmets off, but keep the suits on until we've secured the area. We removed our helmets. The air was breathable, as my readings showed, but it carried a strange, metallic tang, like old copper and ozone. The main corridor was illuminated by dim, blue emergency lights. I could hear the low thrum of machinery in the background, life support, air recyclers, water systems, all working as if no one had ever left this place. "This is insane," Alara whispered, her voice unnaturally loud in the quiet corridor. We moved deeper into the facility, reaching the common area. What we found there stopped us cold. The room looked recently used. A table in the center held 3 mugs, each with dried rings of coffee. Food packets, some opened, were stacked neatly on a counter. A comm tablet lay on the table beside one of the mugs. "Someone's been living here," Alara breathed, picking up one of the mugs and turning it in her hand. I moved to the main computer terminal and activated it. The system sprang to life immediately, no passwords required. I scrolled through the log entries, a knot tightening in my stomach. Last entry, 18 months ago. My eyes scanned the text. Just says, Cycle 19, Day 127, no response from command. Continuing observation of the chrono-engine anomaly. Chrono-engine, Kale murmured, looking over my shoulder. Doesn't specify, I said, shaking my head. Nothing else after that. Kale turned slowly, his eyes narrowed, scanning the room. His hand instinctively moved to where his sidearm would normally be, though he hadn't brought weapons on what was supposed to be a routine research mission. A soft thud echoed from somewhere deeper in the base. Kale raised his hand, signaling for silence. After a moment, another sound came, something between a scrape and a shuffle. "Heard that," Kale said quietly, pointing towards a corridor leading to the sleeping quarters and research labs. Alara's eyes widened. Could someone still be here? After all this, checked the life support readings on my tablet. System indicates it's supporting 3 individuals. 3, Kale's eyebrows rose. That's impossible. Another sound came from the corridor, closer this time, definitely footsteps. Kale straightened his shoulders, taking a step toward the sound. "Stay behind me." We moved as a group, guided by the dim blue emergency lights. The footsteps had stopped, but I could feel it now. We weren't alone in Outpost Kronos. I froze in the mess hall doorway, my breath catching in my throat. Sitting at the table were 3 people who couldn't possibly exist, ourselves. Another Kale, another Alara, and another Jax. All wearing faded mission patches, looking just as shocked as we were. This other Jax had a thin, gaunt face, with dark circles under his eyes and a patchy, unkempt beard instead of his usual clean-shaven look. He stared at me with a look that made my skin crawl. "This is impossible," Kale whispered beside me, his hand still reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. Space missions didn't include weapons. The other Kale, the one with more gray in his hair and deep lines etched around his eyes, slowly raised his hands. "We've been expecting you," he said, his voice a rougher version of our captain's, as if he hadn't spoken much recently. "We hoped you wouldn't come." Alara gripped my arm so hard I could feel her nails through my jumpsuit. Her face went completely white. "How?" she started, but couldn't seem to form the rest of the question. The other Alara had her hair down and messy. She looked at our Alara with tears in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry you're here." I stepped forward. "Who are you people? Is this some kind of elaborate psychological test?" The other Jax laughed, a raw, humorless sound. "That's exactly what I said, word for word." He tapped his temple. "Still thinking like a scientist. That won't last." Kale moved in front of Alara and me. "Identify yourselves now." The other Kale sighed, rising slowly. "We're Lunar Vessel Horizon 7 crew. Captain Kale, Systems Specialist Jax, and Pilot Alara. We were diverted here to Kronos 18 months ago because of a containment breach at Orion Prime." "That's us," our Kale said flatly. "Those are our names, our mission designation." "Yes," the other Kale, Echo Kale, I would come to call him, nodded. "We're you or you're us. Time, it doesn't work normally here." Echo, Alara wiped her eyes and spoke through her tears. "We were told to divert to Kronos, just like you. Our module crashed after landing. We've been stranded here ever since." My mind raced through possible explanations. Hallucinations from oxygen deprivation, a sophisticated hoax, clones, imposters. None made sense. I pulled out my tablet and accessed the mission database. If these people were who they claimed to be, there should be records. I searched for Horizon 7, Kronos diversion. I felt sick as I read the report. According to this, I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears, lunar vessel Horizon 7 was lost with all hands 18 months ago. Module experienced catastrophic failure during landing at Outpost Kronos, declared dead. Echo, Jack said, his eyes darting around nervously. Makes sense. No one could have survived that crash. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. We're you from the past. Time works differently here, you'll see. Arkale took a step back. We need to discuss this privately. He motioned to Alara and me. We retreated to the corridor outside the mess hall, huddling close. They can't be us, Alara whispered. It's not possible, agreed, Kale said, but they know our mission details, our names, and they're physically identical to us, just older, more worn down. I ran my hand through my short hair, trying to think clearly. If the outpost was abandoned decades ago, who's been maintaining it? The life support systems are running perfectly. The power is on. Someone's been living here, them apparently, Kale said, glancing back toward the mess hall. But how? And why tell us they're us from the past? It makes no sense. We need to contact Mission Command, request immediate extraction. Once the situation at Orion Prime is cleared, we could relocate there instead. Kale nodded. I'll try to establish communications again. The signal's been spotty since we landed. If they're telling the truth, Alara asked quietly, what if time really is broken here somehow? I wanted to dismiss the idea outright, but after what we had just seen, I couldn't. Then we need to figure out what's causing it, and how to fix it, but first, more information. We returned to the mess hall, maintaining a wary distance from our doppelgangers. Echo Kale seemed to understand our caution and didn't push. You have questions, he said. That's natural, ask whatever you want. You're us from the past, Kale began. How are you here now? Wouldn't that create a paradox? Echo Jax laughed again, that same humorless sound. Paradoxes are the least of our problems. The normal rules don't apply here. What happened to your module? I asked. Echo Kale and Equilara exchanged a look that made my stomach tighten. It crashed during landing, Echo Kale explained, despite Alara's best efforts. The guidance systems failed at the last minute. We barely made it out alive. But our landing was perfect, Alara protested. Equilara looked away, unable to meet her eyes. So was mine, she whispered. For the next few hours, we questioned them about their experiences at Outpost Kronos. Their answers were detailed but often cryptic, as if they were holding back crucial information. They described months of isolation, failed rescue attempts, and strange phenomena they couldn't explain. Communications with Earth are unreliable, Echokale told us. Sometimes messages get through, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they arrive before they're sent. Night came, or what passed for it on our lunar schedule. Kale managed a weak connection with Mission Command. The message was rife with static, but we understood enough to know the situation at Orion Prime wasn't fixed yet. No one could come get us anytime soon. I tried to sleep that night in the crew quarters our duplicates had given us, a section of the base far from their rooms. My mind kept returning to the impossible meeting, searching for logical explanations, but finding none. A colossal explosion jolted me awake. The entire base shuddered violently, and alarms blared through the hallways. I jumped out of bed, meeting Kale and Alara in the hall. What was that? Alara asked, her voice tight with fear. Sounded like it came from outside, Kale said, already moving toward the EVA prep room. Suit up now. We donned our pressure suits with practiced speed, though my hands shook as I secured my helmet. Within minutes, we were cycling through the airlock, stepping onto the lunar surface. I stopped dead in my tracks at what I saw. Our lunar module, which we had landed safely just 3 days ago, was engulfed in silent fire in the vacuum of space. Flames flickered without sound, consuming our only way off this desolate rock. Twisted metal and debris lay scattered across the lunar surface, some pieces still glowing red-hot. That's impossible, Alara whispered through the comms. I checked all systems before we left. Everything was nominal. It was perfect. It was, came a voice from behind us. Echo Kale had suited up and followed us outside, just like ours was, until it wasn't. I turned to look at him. Through his helmet visor, his face showed no surprise, only a grim resignation. It always happens, he said, gesturing toward the burning wreckage. Now you're trapped too. The flames danced in the reflection on his visor as he spoke. I looked back at what was left of our only way home and felt sick to my stomach. We were stuck on Outpost Kronos, with copies of ourselves, and a mystery that defied all scientific understanding. As the flames began to die out in the oxygen-starved environment, I realized our problem was far worse than just a broken ship. Something was terribly wrong with this place. Something that didn't follow the rules of physics or even time. And now we were trapped here, just like our echoes had been for the past 18 months. After the shock of watching our lunar module burn under the moon's empty sky, we returned inside Outpost Kronos in stunned silence. I checked my wrist comm. Not even 24 hours since we arrived, and we'd already lost our only way home. The next week passed in a blur of confusion and growing dread. We fell into a nervous routine, sharing the base with our echo selves while trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy. Kale established rules that kept our group apart from theirs when possible, but the base's confined space made complete separation impossible. I sat at the small desk in my quarters, typing on my tablet as I updated our ship's log. Writing everything down helped me stay focused when everything else felt like it was unraveling. Day 7 at Outpost Kronos, I typed. Module explosion continues to match pattern described by Echo Crew. Supplies remain adequate, water recycling at 97% efficiency, air quality nominal, no rescue communication from Earth despite repeated attempts. I saved the entry and leaned back in my chair. The quarters were Spartan. A narrow bed, the desk, a small storage locker, and little else. The walls were standard-issue gray composite material, but someone had drawn small, precise marks in the corner near the ceiling. Looking closer, I realized they were tally marks, like someone counting days. Exactly 18 months worth of days. A quiet knock on my door pulled me back to reality. "Come in," I called. The door slid open, and Echo Jack stood in the hallway, his hair standing at odd angles, his eyes possessing the jumpy, agitated look of someone who hadn't slept in days. "I need to show you something," he said without preamble. I hesitated. Of all our duplicates, Echo Jack's was the one who made me most uncomfortable. Looking at him was like seeing a broken version of myself, a grim preview of what might happen if we stayed here too long. "What is it?" I asked, not moving from my seat. "The equations." "The equations I've been working on." He held up his tablet, the screen filled with complex formulas and diagrams. "You need to understand what's happening to us." I glanced at my comm. The weekly briefing with both crews was scheduled in 15 minutes. "Can this wait until after the meeting?" "No." Echo Jack stepped inside without invitation and closed the door. "They don't want to hear it." Echo Kale thinks I'm losing my mind, but I'm the only one seeing clearly. I stood up, maintaining some distance between us. "Seeing what clearly?" "It's a time loop," he said, tapping furiously at his tablet to bring up a diagram. "The base sits on some kind of anomaly. Look at these energy readings I've been taking." The screen displayed a pulsing wave pattern with spikes occurring at regular intervals. "What am I looking at?" I asked. "Quantum distortions. They're strongest at the center of the base and weaken as you move outward." He pulled up another screen. "When you crashed, like we did, it completed the circuit. The loop needs energy to maintain itself. The crashes provide that energy." He looked up at me, his eyes wide, almost manic. "Don't you see? It's feeding on us, on the patterns we create." A second knock interrupted us. Kale stood in the doorway, his expression tightening when he saw Echo Jack's. "Meeting starting early," he said, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. Echo Jack's clutched his tablet to his chest. "I was just explaining. You can explain to everyone," Kale cut him off. "Let's go." I followed them down the hall to the common area, where both crews had gathered around the large table. Ilara sat next to Equilara, both women looking down at their hands. Echo Kale stood at the head of the table, waiting for us. "Now that we're all here," Echo Kale began once we'd taken our seats, "I think it's time we discussed our situation more frankly." Kale leaned forward. "I've been wanting to ask you some questions." Echo Kale nodded. "The containment breach at Orion Prime," Kale said. "Was it?" Heavy silence fell over the room. Echo Kale exchanged a look with Equilara before answering. "No," he said finally, "there was no breach. It was an excuse to divert you here, just as it diverted us 18 months ago." Ilara looked up quickly. "Then who sent the order?" "Who diverted us?" Equilara wouldn't meet her eyes. "We did, we will, it's all part of the loop." "Doesn't make sense," I said. "How could you send us a message before you even knew we existed?" Echo Jax laughed, that sound that made the hair on my neck stand up. "Time doesn't work normally here. Cause and effect get all mixed up." "I don't believe you," Kale said flatly. "Mission Command confirmed the diversion." I pulled out my tablet. "I can check the communication logs. Every message is archived with source metadata." No one stopped me as I accessed the system and pulled up the logs from the day of our arrival. I scrolled until I found the diversion order. "This can't be right," I muttered, checking the transmission source code. "What is it?" Kale asked. I looked up, my mouth dry. The diversion order, it originated from Kronos, not Mission Command. "Someone at this base sent the message that brought us here." Echo Kale nodded slowly. "The same thing happened to us. We found the same log entry after our crash. But who sent it?" Alara asked, her voice tight with frustration. "We don't know," Echo Alara said. "The loop continues with, or without our understanding." The meeting went on for another hour, with Echo Kale recounting what they'd discovered during their 18 months at Kronos. They'd tried to leave multiple times, but each attempt ended with equipment failure or strange accidents. They could talk to Earth sometimes, but the signal became increasingly degraded over time. When the meeting finished, I needed to get out of the stuffy air inside. After Kale agreed, I donned my suit and went outside to inspect the wreckage of our module. The moon was silent as I walked to the crash site. Our module was a mangled wreck, parts strewn across the gray dust. About 50 yards beyond it, I could see older debris, what was left of Echo Kale's craft. I walked carefully around both crash sites, taking photos and measurements. The way the parts were laid out caught my eye. I marked where the main pieces from both crashes were on my tablet map, then overlaid one map on top of the other. The match was exact, too exact to be random. Every piece of our mangled module lined up perfectly with a piece from the older crash, like they were the same event, viewed at different times. I stood there on the moon, looking at what my tablet showed. It made me dizzy to think about it. If Echo Jax was right about the time loop, if we were truly stuck in some kind of temporal anomaly, I noticed something move. Another figure in a spacesuit was heading toward the base entrance, walking awkwardly, as if in a hurry. I could tell it was Echo Jax from his suit markings. When I got back to the base 30 minutes later, an alarm was wailing through the hallways. I hurried through decontamination and found Kale and Alara running toward the crew quarters. "What's happening?" I called, rushing to catch up. "It's Echo Jax," Kale shouted over his shoulder. "Something's wrong." We reached the Echo crew's quarters and found Echo Kale trying to override the door lock. Terrified screams emanated from inside the room, Echo Jax's voice, raw with fear. The door slid open and we all rushed inside. Echo Jax was on his knees in the corner, clawing at the walls with his bare hands. Blood streaked the gray surface where his nails had broken against the hard material. "We need to get out," he screamed, not seeming to notice our arrival. "We need to get out before it happens again." Echo Kale and Kale managed to hold him down as he fought against them, his eyes wild and unseeing. "Before what happens again?" I asked, helping to restrain him while Alara retrieved a sedative from the medical kit. Echo Jax looked at me, his eyes wide with terror. "Before we become them," he whispered, his bloody fingers clutching at my jumpsuit. "Before we send the message, before we complete the loop." The sedative took effect and Echo Jax's grip loosened. I looked at the wall where he'd been clawing. Among the bloody streaks were words scratched into the surface, 19 cycles. I turned to ask Echo Kale what it meant, but he was already looking at me with an expression that made me unable to speak. He knew I'd figure it out eventually. 2 weeks went by at Outpost Kronos. I couldn't stop thinking about the bloody words Echo Jax had scratched into his wall, 19 cycles. Every time I asked Echo Kale about their meaning, he looked away and changed the subject. I sat at my desk, updating our log with the day's events. My fingers paused over the tablet, unsure how to describe Echo Jax's worsening condition. Deteriorated seemed too clinical. Gotten worse didn't capture how terrifying his change was becoming. Right in front of us, Echo Jax rarely slept anymore. He paced the corridors at all hours, his footsteps echoing through the base's metal floors. The sound had become a constant background to our days, a steady reminder that something was profoundly wrong here. When he wasn't walking, he was writing, covering any surface he could find with equations and diagrams. The walls near his room were now covered in complex formulas, arrows connecting what looked like random variables, and the same phrases written over and over. Breaking the sequence, temporal divergence point, anomaly containment failure. Eyes had changed too. When we first arrived, there had been fear in them, mixed with a desperate hope that we might somehow help him. Now they looked darker, opaque. Whenever he looked at me during meals, I'd catch him watching me from across the table, fork stopped halfway to his mouth, his gaze filled with such hatred and jealousy that it made my skin crawl. I started eating in my room, or timing my meals to avoid him. Kale noticed, of course. He noticed everything. "You can't hide from him forever," he said to me one morning as I hurried away from the common area with my breakfast pouch. "We're stuck here together." I slowed down to let him catch up. "I'm not hiding, I'm just giving him space." "He's fixating on you more each day," Kale said, keeping his voice low. "Echo Kale says it happened before. The way he sees it, you're the variable that could change the equation." "Does that even mean?" I asked. Kale shook his head. "I don't know, but we need to be careful." We'd started a regular check-in schedule with Mission Command after our first week here. The messages took hours to transmit, what Echo Kale called the interference, and the answers came back broken and choppy. But it was our only link to Earth, where time was normal and perhaps our only hope for rescue. I went with Kale to the communications room that afternoon while he sent our daily update. Like every other day, he added an urgent request for emergency pickup. The reply came back 8 hours later, the voice cutting out every few words. "Containment, Orion, unresolved, extraction, not possible. Maintain position, estimate, 2 more cycles, sending supplies." Kale shut off the transmission and leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes. "Do you believe them?" I asked. "What do you mean, the containment breach?" "The 2-week timeline. What if these messages are part of it too? Part of the loop?" Kale stared at the blank screen. "I've been wondering the same thing." That evening, I found Equilara alone in the observatory. Unlike Echo Jax, she'd grown quieter over the past 2 weeks, withdrawing into herself. She sat with her knees pulled up to her chest, looking out at the stars. "Mind if I join you?" I asked. She pointed to the empty chair next to her. Up close, I could see the dark circles under her eyes and how her jumpsuit looked too big on her. She wasn't eating enough. "Do you ever wonder if the stars are the same?" she asked without looking at me. "If we're seeing the same sky everyone else is, or if even that's different here." I hadn't thought about it, I admitted. She pulled a small notebook from her pocket and held it out to me. "I found this yesterday. It's my journal from when we first arrived." I took it carefully. The cover was worn, the pages dog-eared from frequent handling. "I stopped writing after the first 3 months," she said. "It felt pointless to keep track anymore. Time becomes meaningless here." I opened the journal. Her handwriting filled page after page, neat at first, then getting more hurried and messy. Dates were at the top of each entry, though sometimes she'd crossed them out and rewritten them, as if she'd lost track. "Did you receive messages from Mission Command too?" I asked, looking up from the journal. "About extraction," she gave a small, sad smile. 2 more weeks, always 2 more weeks. And the supplies they promised never came. She turned to face me fully. "Have you figured it out yet? What the 19 cycles means?" My chest tightened. "Number, Will." She looked back at the stars. "Ilara already suspects. I can see it in her face when she looks at me. She knows she's becoming me." I wanted to argue, to tell her our Ilara was fine, but I couldn't get the words out. The truth was, Ilara had been quieter lately too, watching her Echo self with growing worry. The next morning, I found a new addition to Echo Jax's wall equations. A circle with 19 hash marks around its edge, with an arrow pointing to where he'd written Jax 19 and Jax 18 beside it. He'd scratched loop integrity failing. "Sequence must be broken. What are you working on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. He spun around, eyes wide with surprise before narrowing in suspicion. "You're studying my work." "Just curious," I said, taking a step back. "Maybe I can help." "Help?" He let out a harsh laugh. "You're the problem, you and all the others." "What others?" I pressed. "The 18 before us." His face changed, as if he suddenly realized something. "So you do know, you're just pretending." He moved closer and lowered his voice. "Which one sent you? Was it Jax 17? Did he warn you about me?" "No one sent me," I said, backing away. "I'm just trying to understand what's happening here." "Liar," he hissed. "You stole my research. You're using it to manipulate the loop." I turned and walked away quickly, his accusations following me down the hall. When I got to the common area, I found Kale and Echo Kale drinking coffee in tense silence. "Echo Jax is getting worse," I said without preamble. Kale nodded. "Echo Kale was just telling me." Echo Kale looked tired, with more wrinkles around his eyes than he had 2 weeks ago. "It happens every time. The scientist breaks first, too analytical, too aware of the impossibility, every time." "Every time," I repeated. "How many times has this happened?" Echo Kale's eyes met mine, then looked away. "You saw the wall that night. At dinner that night, all 6 of us sat together at the large table in the mess hall." The silence felt oppressive, broken only by the scrape of utensils against plates. Ilara sat next to her Echo self, both women picking at their food without interest. Kale and Echo Kale ate steadily, watching Echo Jacks from the corners of their eyes. I kept my head down, focusing on my meal, but I could feel Echo Jacks watching me. When I finally looked up, his eyes were on me, his fork gripped so tightly in his hand that his knuckles had turned white. "You know what I realized today?" he said, his voice unnaturally loud in the quiet room. "He's reading my notes." He pointed his fork at me. "Every night when I sleep, he goes through my research." "No one's reading your notes, Jax," Echo Kale said firmly. "Seen him," Echo Jax's voice rose. "He's stealing my work to use it against me." "That's not true," I said. "I haven't touched your research." "Liar." Echo Jax suddenly lunged across the table, fork aimed at my face like a weapon. I jerked backward, my chair tipping over as I fell. The fork missed my eye by inches, slashing across my cheek instead. Kale and Echo Kale jumped into action, grabbing Echo Jax and pulling him away. He fought against them, yelling wildly, his face twisted with anger. Ilara pressed a napkin to my bleeding cheek while Equilara watched with a blank, distant stare, as if she already knew what was happening. Later that night, after they gave Echo Jax something to calm him down and locked him in his room, the four of us, Kale, Echo Kale, Ilara, and I met in the observatory to discuss what happened. "We need to restrict contact between the crews," Kale said, his voice firm. "Especially between Jax and Echo Jax." Echo Kale nodded. "We expected this. It's why we tried to prepare you." "Prepare us for what?" Ilara asked, her voice sharp with fear and frustration. "What aren't you telling us?" Echo Kale and Equilara exchanged a look I couldn't interpret. "We'd hoped this cycle might be different," Equilara said quietly. "What cycle?" I demanded. "What is the 19 cycles about?" No one answered. The silence stretched until Kale broke it with a sigh. "Get some rest, everyone. We'll establish new protocols in the morning." I couldn't sleep that night. My cheek throbbed where Echo Jax's fork had cut me, but it was all the questions without answers that kept me awake. Around 3:00 a.m., I gave up and decided to explore the parts of the base we hadn't fully looked through yet. The lower level contained storage rooms and maintenance areas. Most were unlocked and filled with what you'd expect: food supplies, water recycling equipment, spare parts for the life support systems. But at the end of the hallway, I found a door that wouldn't open with my access code. I tried Kale's override code, which he'd given me for emergencies. The lock clicked, and the door opened to reveal a small room with storage lockers lining the walls. The air inside smelled stale, as if no one had been there for months or longer. I opened the first locker and found a comm tablet and a handwritten journal. The log was labeled Lunar Vessel Horizon 7, Captain Kale. It was Kale's handwriting, but the dates were wrong. According to this log, it had been written 18 months ago when our echoes arrived. The next locker had another set of identical logs, but with subtle differences in the entries, slight changes in wording, in events, in reactions. And then another set, and another. By the time Ilara found me, I was sitting on the floor, surrounded by 18 sets of mission logs, all describing the same events with minor variations, each one stopping abruptly. "Jax," her voice was barely above a whisper. "What is all this?" I looked up at her, the truth finally sinking in. "We're not the second crew to arrive here. We're the 19th. She picked up one of the journals, flipping through pages that talked about things we'd already experienced. The diversion to Kronos, finding duplicates, the module crash. At the handwriting, I said, "They're all from different versions of us. But how?" "The anomaly Echo Jax keeps talking about," she said. "It's not just bending time. It's repeating it over and over, each cycle slightly different from the last." Ilara sat down beside me, her face pale in the dim light, "And it always ends the same way." I pointed to the abrupt endings of each journal. "Something happens, something none of them live to write about." "Echo Jax knows," she said. "That's why he's losing his mind. And Echo Kale and Equilara know too. They've been trying to warn us without telling us directly." We sat in silence, surrounded by the evidence of 18 failed attempts to break free of whatever held us in its grip at Outpost Kronos. 18 versions of ourselves who had lived and died here, trapped in an endless cycle. "What do we do now?" Ilara asked finally. I had no answer for her. The cut on my cheek throbbed, but it was nothing compared to how hollow I felt inside. We weren't just stuck on the moon with no way home. We were stuck in time, following a path that other versions of us had already walked. And somewhere in the base, locked up in our homemade cell, Echo Jax was already planning his next move, convinced I was the enemy he needed to eliminate to break the cycle. When I saw how much he hated me as he came at me with that fork, I knew this was just the start of our problems. Finding 18 old mission logs killed any remaining hope that we were the first ones stuck here. Alara and I stayed up all night, reading through each journal, noting how each cycle differed, hunting for anything that could help us escape this loop. By morning, we had nothing. Just 18 copies of the same bad dream, playing out slightly differently each time. When we showed Kale what we found, he looked as if he'd aged decades in an instant. "We need to tell the others," he said. Finally, Echo Kale took the news with a grim calm, as if he'd known it was coming. Equilara just nodded, her eyes blank. Echo Jax, though, went completely off the rails after that. His paranoia turned into full-blown psychosis. "You're all part of it," he screamed during dinner that evening, throwing his tray against the wall. "Puppets in the game, every one of you." Over the following weeks, his episodes grew worse and more violent. He ripped apart his room, covered every surface with increasingly frantic equations, and blamed everyone, especially me, for sabotaging his attempts to break the loop 1 month after we arrived at Outpost Kronos. I helped Kale move a reinforced medical cabinet against the wall of the converted medical bay. We'd spent the morning reinforcing the room, removing anything Echo Jax could use as a weapon, and installing a reinforced window in the door for observation. "That should hold," Kale said, stepping back to inspect our work. "Pass me that screwdriver." I handed it to him, watching as he secured the cabinet to the floor. Bolting the medical bay into a locked holding area felt like crossing a line we couldn't uncross, like we were finally admitting that one of us was beyond help. "What triggered his last attack?" I asked. Kale tightened the final bolt before answering. He saw Alara making tally marks on her arm, claimed she was signaling to the others about his progress. Yesterday's incident had been the worst yet. Echo Jax had lunged at Alara in the corridor, grabbing her by the throat and slamming her against the wall. He'd been screaming about conspiracies and signals while his fingers tightened around her neck. If Kale and Echo Kale hadn't pulled him off, he might have killed her. "We need a sedation schedule," Kale said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Something to keep him calm but not completely incapacitated." Echo Kale, who stood in the doorway watching us work, nodded. The weeks had drawn deeper lines into his face. He looked tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. "We had to do the same thing," he said, nodding toward our modifications. "It always progresses this way. The scientist breaks first. Then the pilot, then," he trailed off. "Then what?" I asked. He shook his head. "You'll see soon enough." Through the window, I could see Echo Jax strapped to the bed. The drugs had worn off enough that his eyes were open, but he wasn't fighting against the restraints anymore. His lips moved constantly, mumbling equations and theories no one else could hear. "How long did you keep him like this?" Kale asked. Echo Kale looked at his crewmate. "Until the end." The thought made my stomach twist. I turned away from the window, unable to look at the man with my face who had gone mad. I didn't want to see what I might become. I left Kale and Echo Kale discussing sedation protocols and went to find Alara. She hadn't shown up for breakfast, and I was worried about her. Since the attack, she'd withdrawn even more. I found her in the observatory, sitting cross-legged on the floor by the large viewing window. Her back was to me, but I could tell from the slump of her shoulders that she knew I was there. "Breakfast is ready if you want some," I offered, stopping a few feet behind her. She didn't turn around. "I'm not hungry." I moved closer and sat down beside her. That's when I saw what she was doing. With a black marker, she was drawing careful tally marks on her left forearm, 31 identical lines. "Alara," I said carefully. "What are those?" She finished drawing the last mark before answering. "Days, 1 month at Kronos." The marks were neat, lined up perfectly, as if she'd been counting them for a long time. "Equilara showed me her identical marks yesterday," she said, finally looking up at me. Her eyes held a distant quality that made me uneasy. "I'm becoming her." "No, you're not," I insisted. "You're still you," she gave me a small, sad smile. "That's what I would have said a month ago, but look." She rolled up her right sleeve to reveal more marks. These were less precise, scattered across her skin like frantic scratches. "I don't remember making these. I found them this morning." My chest tightened. "Maybe you did it in your sleep." "Echo, Alara has them too." In exactly the same pattern, she traced the chaotic marks with her finger. "She doesn't remember making them either." I didn't know what to say to that. More and more evidence kept surfacing, proving we were stuck in this monstrous cycle, and each new discovery was worse than the last. "Have you seen what Kale's been doing?" she asked. I shook my head. He spends hours in the chapel now, reading the Bible, talking to Echo Kale about what it all means. She let her sleeve fall back into place. They think God is testing us. Noticed Kale wasn't around during off hours, but didn't know where he went. The base had a small chapel area in the rec room, just a quiet corner with some religious texts rather than anything fancy. I'd never seen Kale care about religion before. Later that day, I found him sitting at a small table with an old, worn Bible open in front of him. Different colored highlights marked several passages, and the margins had notes written in different handwriting styles. "Mind if I join you?" I asked. He looked up, seeming almost embarrassed to be caught. "I was just reading." I sat across from him. "Ilara mentioned you've been spending time here." Kale nodded, his finger running along a highlighted verse. Echo Kale showed me this. "Look," he turned the Bible so I could see. Revelation 27, highlighted in faded yellow ink, "And when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison." All these highlighted sections, Kale continued, they're about eternal punishment. Being trapped in cycles of suffering, this one was marked by the crew before Echo Kale's team. He flipped to another page, and this one by the crew before them. Each passage was about the same thing. People stuck in endless suffering, going through the same pain over and over again. Different groups who'd been here before had found these verses, marked them up, and written their thoughts in the margins. "What do you think it means?" I asked. Kale closed the Bible slowly. "I think whatever has us trapped here is beyond our understanding. Echo Kale believes it's a test. I'm starting to think he might be right." I left Kale to his thoughts and went to do what I did best. Gather data, look for patterns, find physical explanations when spiritual ones didn't work for me. Over the next few days, I examined every part of the base. What I found made no sense. Some sections of chronos looked far older than others, with wear marks that would take decades to form, not just the few years since the base was supposedly abandoned. The repairs on some walls used materials from different time periods, some from our time, others that looked older than the first moon landings. The weirdest parts had technology I couldn't even name, components that looked more advanced than anything we had on Earth right now. Some walls had intricate circuit designs made with materials I'd never seen before. I was examining one of these strange sections when Echo Kale found me. "Figured it out yet?" he asked, leaning against the corridor wall. I shook my head. "This shouldn't be possible, some of this technology. It's not ours, not yet." Echo Kale corrected. He gestured for me to follow him. "There's something else you should see." He led me to a maintenance room we hardly ever used. The floor panels were pulled up, revealing the base's foundation underneath. Right in the middle, embedded in the concrete, was a strange metallic object about the size of a basketball. Its surface glowed with a faint blue light that pulsed in a steady rhythm. "What is that?" I asked, kneeling down for a closer look. "We don't know exactly," Echo Kale said, "but we have a theory. The base exists in multiple times simultaneously. Whatever caused this, it trapped pieces of reality together like layers of rock." He pointed to the object. "We think it started with this. The original construction crew found something beneath the lunar surface and brought it up, something that shouldn't have been disturbed." The object glowed a bit brighter as I moved closer, its pulses quickening. "It reacts to proximity," Echo Kale explained, "and it emits energy readings unlike anything in our scientific understanding. We've tried moving it, destroying it. Nothing works." I leaned back, processing this information. "So this thing, whatever it is, created the time loop, or it's a physical manifestation of the loop itself?" Echo Kale shrugged. "Your guess is as good as mine." Echo Jax had theories about quantum entanglement, about the object existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously, but he went insane before he could figure it out. I finished. Echo Kale nodded grimly. "Like all the versions before him." I stared at the pulsing object, trying to make sense of its existence. If we were the 19th crew to experience this, where were all the others? "Why only one duplicate crew at a time?" "The loop recycles," Echo Kale said quietly. "When a cycle ends, it begins again with variations. The previous versions get absorbed somehow. Except for one crew that remains as witnesses for the next, and that's you this time." "Yes. What happens to you when the cycle resets?" I asked. Echo Kale's face got dark. "I don't know, none of us do. Maybe we cease to exist. Maybe we become part of the next loop in some way we don't understand." I thought of the 18 sets of logs we'd found, each one ending abruptly. "How does it end, the cycle?" He turned away from the object. I couldn't see his face clearly anymore. "You already know too much. Knowledge only speeds up the progression. Echo Jax knew, I pressed. That's why he broke. Yes, Echo Kale headed for the door, and now you know too. Be careful what you do with that knowledge, Jax. After he left, I stayed for a while, looking at the strange object as it pulsed with an eerie light. It seemed insane to think it existed outside normal time, creating this bubble where past, present, and maybe future all mixed together. But the proof was all around us. The duplicate crew, the weird technology, and how the base itself showed different time periods all mashed together. When I went back to the main level, I found Alara still in the observatory. She hadn't moved in hours, just staring out at the moon's surface. "Did you know," she said without looking at me, "that I can sometimes see movement out there, shadows that shouldn't exist?" I sat beside her. "What kind of shadows?" "People in pressure suits." She pressed her palm against the thick glass. "I think they're the others, the ones who came before." The thought made me feel uneasy. "Have you told Kale?" She nodded. "He says Echo Kale sees them too, says they're like ripples in time." Finally, she turned to face me. "What did you find today? I can tell you found something." I told her about the object beneath the floor, about Echo Kale's theory of merged realities. "Do you think we can break it?" she asked when I'd finished. "The cycle? I don't know. 18 crews before us have tried and failed." She looked back out at the lunar surface. "Maybe we're different. Maybe we can do something they couldn't." I wanted to believe her, but as I looked at the empty landscape outside, I saw what she'd talked about. A shadow moving where it shouldn't be, the outline of a spacesuit that looked wavy for a second before it disappeared. I finally understood why Echo Jax had lost his mind. The truth was just too much for anyone to handle. We were stuck in a time loop, trapped with pieces of our past and future selves, orbiting this alien thing that made no sense. And somewhere in the base, locked up in our homemade cell, Echo Jax kept mumbling his equations over and over. I wondered how long, until I ended up just like him 6 weeks into our imprisonment at Outpost Kronos. The alarm shrieked through the corridors. I shot up in bed as the noise jolted me awake, quickly pulling on my boots. Red emergency lights flashed in time with the siren, painting the walls in an ominous glow. I grabbed the small electric prod we'd fashioned from spare parts. We needed it for Echo Jax, whose violence had escalated. The alarm could only mean one thing: he had gotten out. The corridor outside my room was empty. I ran toward the medical bay, the prod held tight in my hand. We'd been taking turns administering Echo Jax's sedatives, enough to keep him calm but not completely incapacitated. Today was Echo Kale's turn. I turned the corner and stopped. Echo Kale was lying face down on the metal floor, blood pooling from a gash on the back of his head. I knelt beside him, checking for a pulse. He was alive but knocked out cold. "Kale," I yelled, hoping our commander was nearby. No answer came. The medical bay door was open, its locks smashed to pieces. Inside, the restraints on the bed where we'd kept Echo Jax were empty. The medicine cabinet was ripped open, its contents strewn across the floor, broken vials and crushed syringes everywhere. I could track Echo Jax's path by following the trail of destruction, dented walls, tipped-over equipment, and smears of blood where he'd cut himself getting free. I walked carefully along this gruesome trail, holding the prod out in front of me. He was heading toward the communications room. "Jax," Alara's voice came over my personal comms, tight with fear. "What's happening?" "Echo Jax has escaped," I whispered. "He attacked Echo Kale. I'm tracking him to the comms room." "Where are you?" "Observatory with Equilara. Kale's heading your way from the mess hall. Stay put. Keep Equilara with you." The communications room door was jammed shut when I reached it. Through the small window, I could see Echo Jax inside, his back to me as he hunched over the main console. His hands moved wildly across the controls, flipping switches and turning dials. His jumpsuit was torn and stained with blood, his hair messy and matted. I tried my access code on the panel. Nothing. Echo Jax had overridden the system. "Echo Jax," I called through the door. "Open up. We can talk about this." He turned around, and I stepped back when I saw his face. His eyes looked almost completely black, with only a thin ring of color visible around the edges. Blood was smeared across his cheeks and forehead from cuts he'd sustained breaking free. His lips were dry and cracked, pulled into a strange expression that wasn't quite a smile, but wasn't exactly a snarl either. "I'm saving us all," he said, his voice strangely calm. I finally figured it out. Behind him, the communications equipment sparked and whirred as he continued sending messages to Earth that would never properly arrive. I heard footsteps and turned to see Kale running toward me, a heavy metal bar clutched in his hand. He's barricaded himself in, I explained quickly, trying to send messages to Earth. Kale nodded grimly. We need to get in there before he damages our only link to mission command. He looked at the door. The manual override might work. Cover me. He moved to a small panel next to the door and pried it open with a screwdriver from his pocket. Inside was the backup system, designed to work even if everything else failed. Kale pulled a lever, and the door made a slow, hissing sound. As it unlocked, Echo Jax heard it too. He grabbed a metal pipe from beside the console, once part of the room's ventilation system. As the door slowly opened, he stood ready, tense and defensive. Stay back, Kale warned me. I'll go first, but I shoved past him. This was my duplicate, my responsibility. Echo Jax put down the pipe. Whatever you're trying to do, I know how to break the loop, he yelled, his eyes wild and unfocused. One of us has to die. He launched himself at me with frightening speed, swinging the pipe at my head. I ducked, feeling the wind of it passing inches above me. Kale tried to grab him from behind, but Echo Jax twisted away with unnatural agility and struck him in the ribs. Kale stumbled back, gasping for breath. Echo Jax turned his attention back to me. You, he wheezed. It has to be you. He swung again, and this time the pipe caught me on the shoulder. Pain exploded through my arm, but I managed to stay on my feet. We circled each other in the cramped space, knocking over equipment as we moved. A monitor crashed to the floor, glass shattering. The communications console sparked as Echo Jax backed into it, dislodging connections. The loop needs different energy to break, Echo Jax said, his voice eerily calm despite his frenzied movements. Death energy, but not just any death, the right one. He lunged again, and we fought amidst the broken equipment. He was far stronger than he looked, especially for someone so gaunt. He was completely unhinged, which granted him a terrifying, unnatural strength. I just couldn't keep up. Why me? I gasped as we struggled. Why not you? His face came close to mine, so near I could smell the sour medication on his breath. Because you're the mistake, he hissed. You're the variable that shouldn't exist. He slammed me against the wall, pressing the pipe across my throat. I choked, trying to push him away, but his weight and the crushing pressure were too much. Black spots started showing up at the edges of my vision. My hand moved blindly along the wall, touching broken equipment, loose wires, then something sharp, a piece of glass from the broken monitor. I grabbed it, feeling it cut into my palm as I held it. Echo Jax pushed harder, his face contorted. It should be you, he wheezed. With my last bit of strength, I plunged the glass shard into his neck. His eyes widened in shock. The pressure on my throat was gone as he stumbled back, hands grabbing at the glass in his neck. Blood pumped between his fingers, bright red and terrifyingly fast. He tried to speak, but only made a wet, gurgling sound. Echo Jax fell to his knees, then dropped face first onto the floor. Blood pooled under him, spreading across the metal. His body twitched once, then stopped moving. I slid down the wall until I was sitting, unable to look away from my own dead face. I had just killed myself, a version of me from another point in the time loop. It felt so wrong, so impossible. I turned and vomited. Kale knelt beside Echo Jax, checking for a pulse. His face was pale. You had no choice, he said quietly. He would have killed you. I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand. What do we do now? We need to tell the others. And he looked down at the body. We need to deal with this. Burying Echo Jax was surreal. We wrapped his body in a sheet from the medical bay and carried it outside in our pressure suits. The moon had no soil to dig in, so we piled up moon rocks around him, a little way from the base entrance. Nobody talked while we worked. What could we even say? Echo Kale had woken up, but was still in the medical bay with a concussion. Equilara stood off to the side during our makeshift funeral, her face empty and far away. Ilara stayed close to her, touching her arm now and then, as if she needed to check her other self was still real. As we placed the last rocks over Echo Jax's covered body, Ilara gasped. Look, she said, pointing. Where we should have seen the white sheet between the rocks, something weird was happening. The fabric was getting transparent. Through it, we could see Echo Jax's body doing the same thing, slowly fading until we could see the moon's surface right through him. What's happening? I asked, my voice sounding strange through the suit's comm system. The loop is reabsorbing him, came Echo Kale's voice through our comms. He'd insisted on monitoring the burial from the medical bay. When we die here, we don't stay dead. We become part of whatever's next. We watched in horror as Echo Jax's body completely disappeared, leaving just an empty sheet that also vanished a few minutes later. Even the blood on the fabric faded away, as if he'd never been there at all. Back at the base, I showered for almost an hour, trying to wash away the feeling of Echo Jax's blood on my hands. I couldn't stop thinking about killing him. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Echo Jax's face as he died. I saw myself dying when I looked at him. I got up and walked through the quiet hallways, ending up outside Echo Jax's old room. The room had been locked since his first violent outburst, when we'd moved him to the medical bay. Without thinking much, I typed in Kale's override code. The door slid open. Inside, the walls were covered with equations, diagrams, and scattered writing, some directly on the walls, others on papers taped up in layers. The bed was against the wall with messy sheets. On the desk sat a leather-bound journal I knew was Echo Jax's logbook. I picked it up, pausing before opening it. This felt like I was snooping, even if it was technically my own stuff. But Echo Jax was gone, and his journal might have information that could help us escape this place. The early entries were normal. Daily reports, notes, theories about the base and the weird thing beneath it. But as I kept reading, the writing got messier, the theories crazier. Whole pages just had the same phrase written over and over: break the loop, break the loop, break the loop. Near the end of the journal, I found what I was looking for and what I was afraid to find. Detailed plans for killing his future self, me. Diagrams of the communications room, notes on when I'd probably be alone, easy to attack. Ideas for weapons, methods, opportunities. The final page had just one paragraph, written in surprisingly neat handwriting. If you're reading this, I've failed and you've killed me instead. That's acceptable. Death is the key. I'm almost certain of it now. The loop needs death energy to reset, but it also needs the right kind of death, not suicide, not accident, blood sacrifice, willing or unwilling. If I'm right, my death will cause a change in the pattern. Watch for it. Be ready. I closed the journal, my hands shaking. Echo Jax hadn't attacked me in a mindless rage. He had deliberately tried to create what he thought was a needed death to break the cycle. And I had given him exactly what he wanted. I went back to my quarters but didn't sleep. I kept thinking about how killing Echo Jax might be changing our time loop, and what it meant for the rest of us stuck in Outpost Kronos. 2 months after arriving at Outpost Kronos, I woke to Alara's screams. The sound jerked me from a dreamless sleep, raw and primal in a way that went straight past thinking and pushed me into action. I threw off my blanket and ran barefoot through the cold metal corridors, following her cries to the common bathroom. Alara stood in the doorway, hands pressed against her mouth, body stiff with shock. Inside the bathroom, water from the shower spray mixed with dark red streaks that swirled toward the drain. Alara lay crumpled on the tile floor, her skin pale white against the crimson blood pooling around her wrists. A sharp piece of mirror shone under the bright bathroom lights, its edge stained red. Kale arrived seconds after me, pushing past us both. He crouched next to Alara, checking for a pulse he wouldn't find. The water kept falling, splashing over his shoulder as he leaned into the shower stall. "Turn it off," he said quietly. I reached in and twisted the knob. The sudden silence made everything worse. Now we could hear Alara's ragged breathing behind us. "She told me yesterday she couldn't do it anymore," Alara whispered, watching the loop continue, knowing what comes next. I turned to look at her. She was frozen, staring at her own dead body, one hand mindlessly rubbing her wrist. Her fingers went round and round over the same spot where Alara had cut her veins. Kale got up, water dripping from his clothes. "We need to move her." "Where?" I asked. The question felt stupid the moment it left my mouth. "We had no morgue, no proper place for a body." "Same as before," Kale said. We wrapped Alara in a shower curtain, making sure not to look at her face with those awful cuts on her wrists. As we carried her through the hallways to the airlock, I kept looking over at Alara, who walked a few steps behind us. She couldn't take her eyes off the bundle we were carrying outside on the moon's surface. We placed Alara next to the pile of rocks where we'd placed Echo Jax 2 weeks ago. The pile looked smaller now. The rocks had moved a bit after his body disappeared. We stood in a half-circle around the wrapped body, our breaths making fog on our helmet visors. Nobody said anything. What could we say that we hadn't already said when Echo Jax died? Through the clear plastic of the shower curtain, I watched it start. The same weird change that had happened to Echo Jax's body. Alara's body started to fade, her edges turning transparent. In just minutes, we could see the moon dust through her chest, her face, until only the bloody curtain was left. Then that disappeared too back inside the base, Ilara went straight to her room without saying anything. Kale and I cleaned the bathroom without talking, washing away all the blood until it was completely gone, just like Equilara's body on the surface. "Do you think that'll happen to all of us?" I asked as I wrung out a mop. Kale looked up from scrubbing the shower drain. "I think it happens to anyone who dies in the loop. They get recycled. That's what Echo Jax was trying to tell us about. Death energy feeding the loop." Kale nodded slowly. "He might have been onto something. Echo Kale has theories too. You've been talking to him a lot. He understands this place better than any of us." Kale stood up, wincing at the stiffness in his knees. "I'm worried about Ilara." "Me too." We finished cleaning in silence. The bathroom looked normal again, with no sign of what happened there hours earlier. Even the mirror had been replaced. Kale found a spare in storage. No one mentioned the missing piece that Equilara had used to end her life. Over the next few days, Ilara hardly spoke. She spent most of her time in the observatory, staring at Earth through the large window, or writing in a journal she wouldn't let anyone see. When she did interact with us, she acted more and more strangely. At dinner 4 days after Equilara's death, I placed a bowl of reconstituted soup in front of her. "Here you go, Ilara." She didn't respond, staring at the table. "Ilara," I repeated. "Equilara," Kale tried, his voice gentle. She looked up immediately. "Yes." I felt a cold dread inside me that surprised me. Ilara blinked, looking confused as she realized what had just happened. I'm sorry," she stammered. "I don't know why Kale reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "It's okay, we're all struggling." But it wasn't okay. Something was happening to Ilara, something beyond normal grief or stress. She was losing her grip on her own identity, slipping into the role of the woman whose body we'd watched dissolve into nothingness. That night, unable to sleep, I went looking for Kale. The base felt different with only 5 of us left, emptier and too quiet. I checked the command center, the labs, and finally headed toward the small chapel area in the corner of the rec room. I found Kale sitting with Echo Kale. They both looked up when I walked in, their identical faces looking utterly spent. A Bible lay open between them on the small table, pages marked with dozens of colorful tabs. "Jax," Kale acknowledged me with a nod. "Couldn't sleep. Too much on my mind." I sat down across from them. "What are you two doing?" Echo Kale closed the Bible gently, comparing notes. He looked worse than Kale, thinner, with darker circles under his eyes and more gray in his beard. Whatever was happening at Outpost Chronos made people age faster than normal. "I've been documenting every loop variation," Echo Kale explained, pushing a thick notebook toward me. "Different configurations, different outcomes. Looking for patterns." I opened the notebook. Page after page of notes, diagrams, and timelines filled the book. Echo Kale had made a detailed system for keeping track of events across multiple cycles. "You think this is a test?" I asked, remembering what Kale had told me about Echo Kale's religious interpretations. Echo Kale nodded slowly. "God, aliens, some cosmic intelligence, something is testing us, forcing us to experience the same events with slight variations, watching how we respond. And you've been recording all of it, as much as I can remember, yes." He took the notebook back, flipping to a specific page. "There's only one constant across all the loops I've experienced or heard about from previous crews." "What's that?" I asked. "When one version of each of us dies, the countdown begins." Kale leaned forward. "What countdown?" Echo Kale looked between us, his expression serious. "To the reset. When the past crew is gone, the present crew is next. Then the loop starts over. That's why Equilara couldn't take it anymore," Kale said quietly. "She knew what was coming," Echo Kale nodded. "She always breaks second, the scientist first, then the pilot." Then he stopped talking, looking at Kale. "The commander," Kale finished for him. I tried to process what they were saying. "So after Echo Jax died, Equilara knew she would be next. That's why she killed herself." "Yes and no," Echo Kale said. "She knew it would happen, but not exactly how. Sometimes she gets sick, sometimes there's an accident. This time," he closed his eyes briefly, "this time she chose her own way out." I thought about the piece of mirror, the precise cuts on her wrists. "She made it quick as she could." Echo Kale sighed heavily. "Now it's my turn." His flat tone chilled me. "What do you mean?" "The pattern continues. 3 deaths, 3 variations." He looked directly at Kale. "You know what I'm asking?" Kale looked at me for a long time, then gave a small nod. I left them to their quiet conversation, worried by what I had heard but unsure what to do about it. The idea of a countdown, started by the deaths of our duplicates, kept me awake as I tried to sleep that night. Around 2:00 a.m., I heard movement in the hall outside my room. Soft footsteps passed my door, then came back 10 minutes later. I waited until they were gone, then got up to check. The base was dark, with only the emergency strips along the floor providing any light. I followed them toward the sleeping quarters, where the remaining Echo crew members slept. As I got close to Echo Kale's room, the door slid open and Kale stepped out. He stopped dead when he saw me. In his hand were 2 medical syringes. His face was wet with tears. I gave him peace, Kale confessed without my having to ask. He asked me to, said he'd done it before, for others. I pushed past him into the room. Echo Kale lay on his bed, eyes closed, hands folded on his chest. If not for the empty syringe on the bedside table, I might have thought he was sleeping. His face looked calm, without all the worry lines I was used to seeing. Morphine, I asked. Kale nodded. Enough to stop his heart, quick and painless. I should have felt horror, anger, something, but all I felt was a dull acceptance. The loop had claimed another of its players, right on schedule. He was in pain, Kale said quietly. Has been since the last cycle. Something happened to his back when they crashed. Their version of the module crash was worse than what would have happened to us, would have happened if EchoJax hadn't warned us about the landing sequence flaw. Kale pocketed the unused syringe. Small variation, just enough to keep it interesting, I guess. We stood together, watching as Echo Kale's body began the process we'd seen before. His hands and feet started turning transparent first, then it spread toward the middle of his body. Unlike the earlier deaths, we could see everything clearly now that we were in the bedroom, without spacesuits or covers blocking our view. It was unsettling to watch. His face got blurry, then transparent, then completely disappeared. The blanket under him slowly flattened as his body vanished. The empty syringe stayed on the bed, the only thing showing he'd been there. 3 down, Kale said quietly, staring at the empty bed. Now the hard part begins. What do you mean? He turned to me, and I couldn't tell what he was thinking in the dim light. We're alone now, just the 3 of us, no more guides. No more warnings. Maybe that's better, I suggested. Maybe we can break the pattern without them. Maybe we're exactly where the loop wants us to be. Kale headed for the door. Get some sleep, Jax. Tomorrow we start Phase 2. Phase 2 of what? Kale paused at the doorway. Of whatever's testing us. The real experiment couldn't begin until they were gone. He left me standing alone in the room where Echo Kale had just disappeared. I sat on the edge of the empty bed, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. The deaths, the disappearances, the loop we seemed stuck in. Outside the small window, Earth was visible in the black sky, beautiful but too far away. Somewhere up there, people were living normal lives, with no idea about our monstrous situation. They were moving through time normally, forward, never going backwards or repeating. I thought about EchoJax, trying so hard to break the cycle by dying. About Equilara, choosing to end things instead of waiting for whatever would happen next. About Echo Kale, asking Kale to help him leave his own way. All 3 of them were gone now, disappeared, but leaving traces of what they'd done before. And the 3 of us were still here, Kale, Ilara, and me, alone at Outpost Kronos with whatever strange thing had trapped us here. The countdown had begun just as Echo Kale had warned. But a countdown to what? Our deaths. Another reset. Something worse. I went back to my quarters but didn't sleep. I sat at my desk, writing down everything that had happened, hoping to find some pattern, some clue that previous versions of ourselves had missed. The answer had to be here somewhere. It had to be, because I couldn't accept the other possibility, that we were truly stuck, repeating the same events over and over with small changes each time, but never escaping. 3 months into our time at Outpost Kronos, I sat alone in the command center. It was too quiet. My comm tablet was nearly full with notes and theories. I was trying desperately to find any pattern or weakness we could exploit. I sifted through weeks of temperature readings from the room with the chrono engine anomaly. I sorted them in different ways, by time, by moon phase, randomly, hoping to spot something useful. After hours of staring, the numbers all ran together, telling me nothing. The base seemed hollow without the Echo crew. It was too quiet. In places where there used to be at least some human noise, now it was just the 3 of us in this vast metal place, mostly staying away from each other. I closed the environmental program and opened the base plans again. There had to be something in the original designs that would explain why they built this particular base over whatever was under the surface. Maybe I missed something in my many times looking at the blueprints. My stomach growled, reminding me I'd skipped breakfast. I couldn't remember if I'd eaten dinner last night either. The days all blurred together now, except for my careful note-taking and the regular check-ins Kale made us do. I walked to the mess hall, my footsteps echoing through the empty hallways. The lighting wasn't working right in several areas, blinking or going dim randomly. None of us had bothered to fix it. Ilara sat alone at the table, a cold cup of coffee in front of her. She didn't look up as I came in. Her hair hung loose and unwashed, and she'd lost enough weight that her jumpsuit hung from her shoulders. "Morning," I said, moving to the food storage unit. She didn't respond. I'd stopped expecting her to. Over the past few weeks, she'd spoken less and less, until conversations had dwindled to nothing but necessary communication about base operations. I heated up a pouch of breakfast mix, rehydrated eggs, and something that looked like sausage, and sat across from her. She was staring at her reflection in the shiny metal table, one hand resting on it. "You should eat something," I said. Ilara's fingers made slow circles on the metal, trying to touch her reflection, as if she thought her hand might go through the surface. I'd caught her doing this more and more lately, checking reflective surfaces all over the base, as if looking for a doorway to somewhere else. "They're coming to get us today," she said suddenly. I paused mid-bite. "Who is Mission Command?" Her voice was flat, emotionless. "The containment breach at Orion Prime is contained. They're sending an extraction team." I felt anxious. This wasn't the first time she'd made such claims. Last week she'd insisted a supply ship had landed outside. The week before, she'd packed her personal items, certain we were leaving. "That's good news," I said carefully. "Did Kale tell you that?" She didn't answer, just continued tracing her reflection with her fingertip. I finished my breakfast in silence, then left her there, still staring down at herself in the metal table. I found Kale in the observatory, standing by the large window that offered the best view of Earth. He was holding a thick, leather-bound notebook I knew was one of Echo Kale's journals. Dark circles sat under his eyes, and his beard had gray in it that wasn't there when we first arrived. "She's getting worse," I said by way of greeting. Kale didn't turn from the window. "I know. Today she thinks Mission Command is sending an extraction team. Yesterday it was her parents coming to visit." Kale sighed heavily. "She's slipping away faster than I expected." I joined him at the window. Earth hung in the blackness, blue and white, and so far away it hurt to look at. "Anything useful in those?" I nodded toward the journal. Kale turned to me, looking grim. "I know why we're here. The chrono engine isn't natural. The original base builders found something under the moon's surface and brought it up, something that broke time." He handed me the journal, open to a page filled with Echo Kale's neat handwriting. Diagrams were all over the margins, showing cutaways of the moon's surface, the base's foundation, and the weird object we'd seen stuck in the floor of the maintenance room. "They were mining for water ice," Kale continued as I skimmed the page. "Standard procedure for establishing the first permanent moon bases. But 20 meters down, they hit something metallic where nothing metal should be. Object appears to be artificial. Composition unknown. Carbon dating impossible. Electromagnetic readings off the scale. Command decision to extract and study, even though the science team objected." "Keep reading," Kale urged. "First temporal distortion noted 16 hours after extraction. Minor at first. Equipment failures, communication lags. By the third day, crew reporting severe déjà vu. Sixth day, 2 crew members encountered themselves in previously empty corridors." I looked up at Kale. "Jesus. They knew something was wrong," Kale said, taking the journal back. "They tried to return the object, bury it again, but by then it was too late. The effect had already taken hold. And Mission Command Earth, why didn't they send help?" Kale flipped forward several pages. "Communications became less reliable. Messages arrived before they were sent. Eventually, Earth stopped responding altogether, or at least, that's how it seemed to the crew inside the distortion field. So what happened to the original crew, the ones who found the object? According to this, they died trying to destroy it. Explosives, drilling into it, even trying to launch it into space. Nothing worked." Kale closed the journal. "And that was the first loop. Since then, it's been cycling through variations. Echo Kale documented at least 19 distinct cycles. The number made my stomach drop. 19 times. That's what Echo Jax wrote on his wall." Kale nodded. "Each loop is a little different, but always ends the same way, with 3 deaths followed by 3 suicides, then a reset. No crew has ever broken the pattern." I walked back and forth by the window, trying to process everything. "But if we know the pattern now, we can change it, do something different." "Like what?" Kale's voice was tired. "Echo Kale tried everything. They all did, and here we are anyway. There has to be something, I insisted, desperation creeping into my voice. Some variable they didn't account for. Cale put the journal down on a nearby console. I've spent weeks looking through these. Echo Cale was incredibly thorough. He wrote down every attempt, every theory, every failure. The object can't be destroyed, can't be removed from the base. The loop can't be broken through normal means. We need to try something different, I said. Cale reached into his pocket and put 2 syringes on the table between us. Echo Cale prepared these before I helped him, enough morphine to stop our hearts. He pushed one toward me. We die on our terms, not as part of its design. I looked at the syringe on the table, with Earth visible through the window behind it. You think killing ourselves will break the loop? Equilara tried that. Echo Cale too, not to break the loop, Cale said quietly, to deny it. The satisfaction of watching us break down like they did, to choose our ending rather than having it thrust upon us. I picked up the syringe, weighing it in my hand. What about Alara? Already done, Cale said, his voice cracking slightly. She asked me to help her an hour ago. She's gone, Jax. The words shocked me. I sank into a chair, still holding the syringe. She's gone. Just like that, Cale nodded. She came to me in tears, thinking clearly for the first time in weeks, said she couldn't tell which Alara she was anymore. Past, present, future. They were all blending together in her mind. I remembered her at the mess hall table, touching her reflection, the distant look in her eyes. The conversation we'd had that morning suddenly took on a new, horrifying meaning. She'd known she was leaving, just not in the way I'd thought. You should have told me, I said, anger flaring briefly. I could have said goodbye, didn't want that. Cale sat across from me. She said it would be harder if you tried to talk her out of it. I looked down at the syringe in my hand, the anger fading as quickly as it had come. So this is it, we just check out. Let the loop win, the loop wins regardless, Cale said. But this way we go peacefully, together, not alone and broken like they did. Through the window, Earth continued its slow arc across the lunar sky, oblivious to our fate. Somewhere up there, people were living normal lives, going to work, falling in love, growing old, all the things we would never do again. Will we remember when it resets? I asked. Cale shook his head. I don't know. Echo Cale thought there might be some bleed-through of memories, but nothing concrete. I rolled the syringe between my fingers. And you're sure this is the only way? I'm not sure of anything anymore, Cale admitted. But I'm tired, Jax. Tired of fighting against something I can't see or understand. Tired of watching history repeat itself. We sat in silence for several minutes, each lost in our own thoughts. Finally, I nodded. Okay. Let's do it. Cale pulled his chair closer to mine. We sat side by side, facing the window, Earth hanging in the black sky. We rolled up our sleeves and positioned the needles against our veins. On 3, Cale said. 1, 2. I pushed the needle into my skin, feeling the cold morphine enter my bloodstream. My last thought was of Alara, wondering if she was already part of the loop, already fading away like the others. Then darkness took me. I opened my eyes to the steady beeping of module instruments. White noise from the navigation system filled the cabin, a sound I knew well, rhythmic and alive. Cale sat at the command console, running pre-approach checks, working with focus and care. Alara was in the pilot's seat, her hands moving across the controls like she'd done it 1,000 times. They both looked younger, rested. No shadows under their eyes, no gaunt cheeks, no 1,000-yard stares. My brain tried to catch up with what my eyes were seeing. Seconds ago, or was it months, I'd been sitting next to Cale in the observatory at Outpost Kronos, pushing a syringe of morphine into my vein. I remembered the cold liquid entering my bloodstream, the darkness taking me. Now I was here, back in the lunar module, approaching lunar orbit, just as we had 3 months ago. Or was it moments ago? I touched my face, clean-shaven. I looked down at my hands, no rough spots from fixing base equipment, no dirt under my fingernails from burying bodies that disappeared. My uniform was crisp new, without the worn patches and stains from months of continuous wear. Approaching final orbital adjustment, Alara announced, not turning away from her instruments. Cale nodded, checking something on his screen. Perfect, right on schedule. I tried to speak, but couldn't find my voice. This wasn't possible, yet it was happening. My mind raced through possibilities, a dream, a hallucination from the morphine, my brain's last thoughts before shutting down. But everything felt too real. The hard seat beneath me, the noise of the air recycling system, the distant rumble of thrusters keeping us on course. Cale's console pinged with an incoming transmission. We're receiving a message, he said, reaching for the comm switch. A sudden realization hit me. I knew what the message would say before Kale even turned on the channel. Lunar Vessel Horizon 7, this is Mission Command. The voice came through crystal clear, no static or distortion. We have a situation at Orion Prime. A containment breach has compromised the primary habitat modules. You are being diverted to Outpost Kronos until we can confirm Orion Prime is safe. New coordinates are being transmitted now. Kale acknowledged the message while Alara began inputting the new coordinates. Neither seemed concerned by this change of plans because they didn't know. They couldn't remember. I felt a cold dread as I realized what was happening. The loop had started over. We were back at the beginning, about to make the same mistake that got us stuck in that nightmare for months. We can't go to Kronos, I said, my voice coming out as a croak. Both Kale and Alara turned to look at me. What did you say, Jax? Kale asked. We can't go to Kronos, I repeated louder now, pushing myself out of my seat. It's a trap, there's something there, something that breaks time. Concern crossed Kale's face. Jax, what's wrong? Are you feeling okay? No, listen to me. I moved toward the command console, my legs unsteady. I've been through this before, we all have. Kronos isn't abandoned, there's a temporal anomaly there. If we land, we'll be trapped in a time loop. Alara had stopped typing coordinates, her eyes wide. Jax, you're not making sense. There's something buried under the base. I continued, the words pouring out. The original construction team found it. Metallic, artificial, it fractured time, created a loop. We've been through this 19 times already. Kale stood up now, putting a hand on my shoulder. Jax, sit down. You must be having some kind of episode. Space sickness, maybe. I shook his hand away. I'm not sick, I remember everything. The base, the duplicates, the deaths. Echo Jax, Echo Alara, Echo Kale, they died, and then we died too. I killed myself, Kale. You gave me the morphine. We both pushed the needle in, and then I woke up here. The concern on their faces had changed to alarm. Kale was moving toward the medical kit. I lunged for the communication system, pushing past him. I had to warn someone, anyone who would listen. Mission Command, this is Jax. Lunar Vessel Horizon 7, Outpost Kronos must be destroyed. It contains a temporal anomaly. Repeat, destroy Kronos immediately. Only static answered. Mikhail pulled me away from the console. That's enough. His voice was hard now, commander mode activated. Alara, get the sedative. No, I twisted out of his grip. You have to believe me. This is the 20th loop. It never ends. We die every time. I looked over at my station. My notepad was open next to the system's monitor. I hadn't used it at all on this trip. We'd only been flying for a few hours, but the page was covered with writing. My writing. I grabbed it, my fingers shaking. The page was filled with calculations, diagrams, and warnings in my handwriting, but not exactly my current handwriting. It was a little different, more rushed and sharp-angled. It was how my writing would look after months of stress and fear at Outpost Kronos. Look at this. I thrust the pad toward Kale. I didn't write this, not yet, but it's my handwriting. What my handwriting becomes. Kale glanced at the notepad, then back at me. Jax, please, sit down. You're having some kind of psychological episode. I insisted. It explains everything. The anomaly, the loop, the deaths. It's all here. Alara appeared at Kale's side, a syringe in her hand. The sight of it sent a flash of memory through me. Sitting beside Kale in the observatory, another syringe in my hand, pushing it into my vein. I backed away from them both. Please just read it, one page. If it doesn't convince you, I'll take the sedative. Kale hesitated, then nodded. 1 minute. He took the notepad from me and began to read. His expression remained skeptical, then confused, then troubled as his eyes moved down the page. He flipped to the next page, then the next. These are detailed schematics of Outpost Kronos and calculations for temporal displacement. Yes, I said, relief flooding through me. It's all there, everything we discovered during the last loop. Alara looked over Kale's shoulder at the pad. That does look like your handwriting, Jax, but more frantic. Because I was frantic, I explained. We all were. Trapped in that base, watching the same patterns repeat, learning we were just the latest iteration of the same crew, experiencing the same deaths over and over. Kale lowered the notepad, his expression somber. Even if what you're saying is true, and I'm not saying I believe it, what can we do? Mission Command has ordered us to Kronos. We ignore the order, I said. We go to Orion Prime anyway. The containment breach is a lie. There never was one, it's just part of the trap. Alara shook her head. We can't disobey a direct order without cause. This is cause, I pointed to the notepad. This is proof. It's not proof, Jax, Kale said gently. It's a notepad with writing we can't explain. That's not enough to justify disobeying mission command. I ran my hands through my hair, pulling at it in frustration. They weren't going to believe me. Of course they weren't. It sounded insane. I wouldn't have believed it either, not before living through it. Look, I said, trying a different approach. Just check in with Orion Prime directly. If there really is a containment breach, they'll confirm it. If not, Kale considered this, then nodded. That's reasonable. He turned to the comm system. Ilara, try to raise Orion Prime. Ilara sat at the communications console and began transmitting. Orion Prime, this is Lunar Vessel Horizon 7, requesting status update. We've been informed of a containment breach situation. Please confirm. We waited. Static hissed from the speakers. Ilara tried again. Orion Prime, this is Lunar Vessel Horizon 7, please respond. More static. I knew there would be no answer. There never was. Kale made a face. Try emergency channels. Ilara switched frequencies and repeated the call. Nothing. This doesn't mean you're right, Kale said to me. Communications problems are common due to lunar interference. I moved to the nearest window and looked out at the moon's surface as we orbited. Far away I could see something shiny, outpost Kronos. There, I pointed. Look at Kronos. Kale and Ilara came over to the window with me. As we looked down, tiny lights blinked on at the base, visible even from orbit. That's strange, Ilara murmured. Kronos should be abandoned. Those are the lights coming on to welcome us, I said quietly, just like last time. Just like every time, Kale pulled back from the viewport, looking worried. I still don't understand how what you're describing could be possible. Time loops, duplicates, it defies all known physics. I know, I admitted. We never figured out exactly how it works, only that it does. The anomaly defies explanation. Ilara had returned to her console and was checking readings. We need to make a decision soon. We're approaching the point where we need to begin descent. Kale looked between us, looking stressed. We've been ordered to Kronos, without concrete evidence to contradict those orders. Lights are on in an abandoned base, I exclaimed. Isn't that evidence enough? It could be automated systems, Kale countered, or mission command could have remotely activated the base for our arrival. I knew I was losing the argument. I could see it in their faces. They felt too much pressure to follow the rules. Ilara's hand hovered over the controls. Commander decision. Kale took a deep breath. Set course for Kronos, as ordered. No, I moved towards Ilara, but Kale blocked my path. You're condemning us to the loop again, Kale. Kale's voice was firm. I'm not saying I disbelieve you entirely, Jax, but we need more information, and we can only get that at Kronos. If what you're saying is true, we'll investigate the anomaly together. We'll be prepared this time. Ilara steered us toward Kronos, moving with the same skill and confidence she always had. I sank back in my seat, feeling utterly defeated. Through the window, outpost Kronos grew larger, its lights shining bright. I could almost see them waiting inside, our duplicates, our future selves, worn down after months stuck in a broken timeline. I knew what would happen next. We would land perfectly, but somehow our module would crash anyway. We would walk to the base, discover it was fully operational. We would meet our older selves, learn about the anomaly, watch them die one by one. Then we would follow the same path to our own deaths. And then I would wake up here again, or perhaps it would be a different version of me next time. Jax 21 instead of Jax 20. I picked up the notepad again, looking at the equations and warnings written by my future self. I hadn't written these words yet, but I would, just like I had 19 times before. It's happening again, I whispered, as we began our descent toward the waiting maw of outpost Kronos. Toward the temporal trap that had claimed us all, over and over, in an endless dance of death and rebirth. Through the viewport, the lunar surface rushed up to meet us. Ilara's hands moved smoothly across the controls. Kale watched our approach path. Everything was exactly as it had been before. The loop continued. What part of this chilling lunar loop stuck with you the most? Share your thoughts below.